Yeah, he's the agenda.
Oh, yes.
I'll give it back to you.
Yeah.
Okay, we'd like to call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda is a presentation from the Collins Center on the town manager search process.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening, Dick. Could you introduce yourself for the audience at home? Thank you.
For the record, my name is Richard Kobayashi. I'm a senior associate at the Collins Center for Public Management at UMass Boston. Just as a frame of reference, the Collins Center was established by the legislature in 2008 to provide management services and training to municipalities and also to state agencies. It was named to memorialize Edward J. Collins, Jr., who was the first deputy commissioner in the Department of Revenue for local services. That's a little bit about who I am and where
Thank
I
you.
come from. One of the practice areas in the Collins Center is the executive recruitment practice. Since 2008, we have engaged in about 30 projects to assist municipalities hire executive talent. Probably 20 to 22 of those have been town administrators or town managers. I'm going to try to make this as conversational as possible. And you know, we're familiar with the history of most towns in Massachusetts, and we know Cohasset has been through a few bumps in the road in the last year or so. So we're not experts, but we have some familiarity with that. Every time we have a conversation like this, we say the same thing, and we say it because we really believe it. And that is that the biggest risk a Board of Selectmen has in choosing a new manager or administrator is the risk of being put in the position where the board winds up faced with the choice of the best person from a mediocre pool of candidates. And if you strip away all the verbiage, our principal job is to make sure that is not the situation that this or any client board is in. Our job is to make sure that at the end of a process, a board has 3 to 5 exemplary candidates to choose among. We have a tried and true process for getting to that result. Of all of the people that we've worked with in terms of helping in processes like this, and that's 20 to 22, I think all but one remain in their jobs. So I'm gonna tell you how our process works in sum, and then kind of make this conversational. We believe we cannot do our job, which is recruiting candidates for the town, unless we know the town, we know the board, and we know what the critical issues are that will face Cohasset or any other town over the next 3 to 5 year cycle. Only if we know that and gain some understanding from talking to folks here in town what kind of management style will work here, only then can we market the job and market the town and have a coherent measuring stick to measure candidates in terms of what the town needs. Now, we have a methodology, and you may have seen these before. They kind of look the same, but they're not the same. Just gonna share these among yourselves.
Thank you.
we produce for all of our clients a profile, and it's a profile of the town, of the job, and of the challenges the new person will face. And it also tries to articulate the kind of management style that will work in our client communities. We write a draft, we share the draft with the board. There's discussion, corrections get made. Sometimes there are differences of view among 5 people on what the right target is. We'll go through as many iterations as we need to go through. It's very important that the board have a pretty solid consensus on what the requirements are. Because if it's not addressed up front in the document, it gets addressed later on when you're picking somebody or in the first few months of a new person's tenure. Only when we have this in hand do we start advertising, accessing a very considerable database of talented people. And we measure people who are candidates or are thinking about being candidates against the requirements that we've agreed to in the profile. The second part of the exercise is we usually, but not always, work with a screening committee. And the principal reason for a screening committee in this state is that a majority of the appointing authority, this board, cannot interview a candidate or review candidate resumes in confidence. And if you can't interview and review resumes in confidence at the preliminary phase of a recruitment, then the pool shrinks very considerably. So that's why it's almost universal for towns to use screening committees. However, screening committees can be small. They can include two members of a 5-member board of selectmen. And some of our clients choose to have small screening committees with 2 selectmen on it and a town moderator and a finance committee chair and 1 or 2 stalwart citizens, and the whole screening committee is kept very close to the town in the sense that all of the people on it know the dynamics of the town as an operating organization and what it needs. We have had other clients where the custom and tradition in the town is that every selectman, to every committee, every selectman appoints 2 people. So in this particular client, all committees have 10 people.
Hey.
But then, so how that's composed has to fit with, and by the way, the outcome was fine, but scheduling was difficult, and that's
Oh, I
stretched
guess
out.
so.
That stretched out the process. We leave it to you to figure out who should be on a screening committee. We do recommend, and if you ask us to help us, we'll help you with this. We do suggest that the screening committee be given a specific written charge by the Board of Selectmen. People find it helpful. It's a month or 2 down the road, and people say, was it 5 to 7 or 3 to 5 or 2 or it's they're kind of like sailing orders. And it turns out to be a helpful exercise. Typically, a screening committee does all the preliminary work. We work with them. They see the names and the resumes of everybody. They see the names of everybody who applies. They see the resumes that we recommend for consideration. And if there's any other resume they want to see that we haven't recommended, it's always in my black bag and always available. We don't operate in secret. We operate in a very transparent way with the committee. When their work is complete, they will recommend typically 3 to 5 candidates to the board. by the time they recommend those candidates, they will be comfortable with them, and all their references and backgrounds will have been checked by us to the committee's satisfaction. So you kind of cut down the risk of, embarrassments later on. Two questions come up pretty often. How long does this take? I would say 90 to 120 days, 3 to 4 months. In Cohasset's case, it's probably good to plan on 4 months, because summer is really our enemy in doing this kind of work. It's hard to get people together. People find it hard to focus. So I would think about 4 months after you pull the trigger with us, the screening committee would have candidates before you. Once those candidates are before you, our contractual work is complete. We're available for consultation, but it's really the board's show. The other question that comes up with some frequency is, well, what do you do about internal candidates? And the answer is, we treat them the same way we treat everybody else. This is a public job. Anybody can apply. We afford internal candidates the same degree of confidentiality we afford anybody else. Just like anybody else, the candidate, him or herself, can talk about whether they applied or not applied, but we maintain strict confidence, and we work with the screening committee to be sure that they follow the same protocol. And why don't I stop right there?
Thank you. Who would like to start with questions? Go
I
ahead.
just wanted to make one comment on the summer being the enemy, because I think that we have 2 new members of the board that haven't been here the last year, and
Who are they? I mean, I don't know everybody, so.
so, sorry.
Sorry, Steve
Steve
and
and
Karen.
And Karen was
Congratulations.
on a
Karen was
previous
selectman
board.
before.
I was
Okay.
selectman before.
Okay.
But, so in a lot of ways, we need to, I think developing a town profile is something that we can spend a critical, we're gonna be meeting regularly during the summer. So in a way that the summer gives us that chance, or at least July for, I don't know how many weeks you would expect that to take, but we all need to have these conversations about, what it is we're looking for, what the priorities are. Because we just haven't had it. We've only been working together for 3 meetings at this point.
Yeah. What we usually do is, my colleague, Mary Icardi, and I, and the 2 of us do all the work. We don't sub it out to students, professors, high school students, anybody else. We make it a point. We'll spend some time talking to each member of the board individually. We'll look for some guidance from the board about who else in town, who are the opinion leaders and seasoned people in the town. We find it advantageous, and Mary usually does this, to meet with all the department heads. They usually have a lot of insight into how the town functions as an employer, how it functions as an organization. What's the degree of cooperation? Is it all siloed, or is there a lot of crosstalk? What kind of management style works here with the troops? So we usually, and then, probably the most important thing we do is, on a first cut, we write a first draft knowing there won't be a perfect draft, and give it to you, and then people can kind of focus on a document, and, it's just words on paper, and we can move them around, and it's an aid. It's an aid to thinking. So and sometimes people kind of focus pretty quickly, and sometimes it needs significant discussion. But we really shouldn't go forward until the board, as a board, feels comfortable.
Mr. Kobayashi,
Sure,
when you bring the process to the point of having several viable your word was, viable, but they were very attractive candidates. Do you provide or do you coach a method for an objective evaluation of those candidates?
Like a scoring system, or
If,
know-
whatever process it might use.
what? Yeah, it's pretty important in a process like this to ask each candidate the same core questions. Now, you can have follow-on questions, and people are gonna have different backgrounds, but the core questions really should be tied into the characteristics
Mm-hmm.
that you've decided are important in the profile. And those are things that, those are questions that the screening committee will ask and the board will ask. And the board will have a different slant on the issues and questions than the screening committee. We have found that, kind of analytical methodologies are not particularly helpful here. This is a top-level general management position in which public communication skills, one-on-one communication skills, the ability to have insight, the ability to have a degree of technical familiarity with the work are all important. And then there are intangibles like leadership. And leadership comes in a variety of styles. And so if you develop a leadership scoring system, well, it might fit the town or it might not fit the town. Or it might fit some members of the board's expectations and not others. So we in these kinds of processes, we tend to shy away from highly structured, thoughtful conversations. We think, while we check references, we have found it valuable when a board gets down to a couple people, say. It's not a bad idea for a couple of board members, and maybe a couple of board members who have different points of view, to go visit the town where that person works now and talk with your political colleagues and department heads and a few people at the coffee shop, et cetera. Now, what's Dick Kobayashi like every day? What's he like on the worst day? And how many of those are there? Where was the stumble? Where was the trip? What were the highlights? In a way, you get more out of that, and it's not really reference checking. It's really getting a read on a person who's gonna be the face of this board in a lot of ways. And those kinds of things tend to work better than score sheets.
Thanks.
I don't have any question, but I just have a comment. I was involved with hiring superintendent of schools, and this is exactly the process we did. We actually, two of us went down and visited the area, and we also, checked into stuff like that. But I think what you're suggesting is very comprehensive.
Was
Yeah.
your reading of the person accurate?
Well, we went to a coffee shop and ate a lot of food and met a lot of people. And we were two very different people on the
Yeah.
board, which was fine. And we came to the same conclusion after we got the information from there and then went back and did the interviews. So,
Yeah, it can be a very important thing for the board to do. And you can learn a lot of stuff that doesn't come up in an interview, and a lot of stuff that's not written down, and get a lot of intuition that you're not gonna find on Google.
That's right, puts the Google search into context.
And the other thing, I don't mean to say this in a political way, but the citizens of a town kind of like to see the public officials doing their own due diligence. It's a sign of, that the officials are serious.
Assuming that I've understood you correctly, I like the idea that you would come in and talk to the employees and the department heads and also to the selectmen, because I always think it's that objective perspective is very interesting. And to see what we, as people who are involved in the weeds, so to speak, may think of, might vary very differently from what would come from you, and I would find that very, very interesting and helpful in the process. I'd also like to just say that although, you know, I agree that summer is an enemy as far as vacations and getting people together and everything, this is really a very critical procedure for the town and restoring the town's confidence in town government. And I would hope that the individuals that would be appointed to the selection committee would be dedicated and would be, you know, taking their family schedules and vacations into consideration. But that is something that would be a requirement, very high priority for me, looking at somebody to be appointed on the committee. So did I understand you correctly?
No,
Yeah, okay,
I think so.
all right.
Your commentary about the summertime, I have to assume it's probably reflective as much on candidates as it is with respect to boards and town activities. Is that right?
You know, when you get to July and August, if you need to have a meeting of a group of people, you know, there's a good chance that 1 to 3 of them can't be there on any given date. So committee kinds of processes tend to get stretched out. If we need to meet one-on-one people, you know, if we need, you know, we can, you know, it's a small state. I mean, we can come to Cohasset more than once, and sometimes if you're missing one person, you do it with a telephone interview, et cetera. But, you know, I don't know your schedule, but boards tend to meet less frequently in the summer.
We apparently don't.
Okay. Oh, well, you know,
Well-
maybe it's not a problem.
Well-
But, you know, it just, it slows down in the same way everything else in the world slows down. It's nothing, and we try to go as fast as we can, but, you know, 5 weeks of effort takes 8 weeks.
No, the speed of the process is, to me, less important than its completion, thorough completion. From that end, you talked about the front end of this, which is really discovery on your part as to what the town is all about, what the dynamics are, and the like. Typically, for you, how long is that engagement? I mean, it can't, I would assume, does not just involve the board. I think you also talked about meeting with department heads and other folks in the community and the like.
I mean, typically, we can get from the stuff, being commissioned to do the work, to having the profile complete and the job advertised, and us starting to work our database in about a calendar month's time. And then you need, let me just take this forward, and then you need at least a solid 4 weeks for open recruitment time. So if we were to start this work on the 1st of July, we could advertise and commence recruitment on or about August 1st. Probably shortly after Labor Day, we would have an initial pool organized in a way that's suitable to meet with the screening committee, the second week in September. Screening committee work typically takes 4 or 5 weeks. Their work is kind of blocked, and then, you know, maybe with a little luck, maybe by Columbus Day or October 15th, you know, that you'd have candidates before this board. There might be a slippage of a couple of weeks in there, that depends on schedules. But that's the way this would likely roll out.
Okay. The services you provide, I think you pointed out that they were essentially, would you say they were created by the state legislature?
The organization was
Right,
created by
okay.
the state legislature. It gave it a name, specified in the budget that there will be such an organization, it will be at UMass Boston, and they appropriated some money to
Okay.
underwrite it.
So, and it's apparently quite a resource for municipalities. Do you compete with anybody?
Almost, the overwhelming bulk of our work is secured on a negotiated basis. Municipalities can contract with us, or actually with any agency of the Commonwealth, through an intergovernmental agreement, and securing consulting services from the Commonwealth is not a thing that's subject to the procurement regulations of Chapter 30B or anything else. It's a government-to-government arrangement.
Okay. Thanks.
I just have a question on the terminology recruitment. So can you explain how actively you actually recruit? Do you call somebody up, you say, I have a profile, I know your town is similar, in terms of,
We're just finishing 3 recruitments. In January, February, we finished 3 there, in that period, at Great Barrington, Sherburne, and one other, and we're finishing, Drake-it, and just finished Reading, and, we're doing a special one for Somerville Retirement Board. There's probably a couple I've forgotten. But because we're doing Topsfield, but because we're doing this all the time, we have a good read, at least within the Massachusetts context, of the people who are at a stage in their career where they're interested in changing jobs, usually sometimes because there's been a political change, sometimes because they want upward mobility in their career. So we know that group, and we reach out to those people. We're pretty well known nationwide, and people call us. And because people who are candidates trust that we can maintain confidentiality, they're comfortable applying through us. It's part of the brand. Typically, if you're in a Massachusetts community, people want, and it's really helpful to have someone with Massachusetts experience, but sometimes there are out-of-state, very well qualified out-of-state people who are appointed. The town of Great Barrington, which you may or may not be familiar with, just hired a senior manager from Mayor Bloomberg's office in New York City to be the town manager. From a very considerable field. I was kind of surprised at first, but then it was pointed out to me that Great Barrington actually is a suburb of New York City. Yeah.
so
I
they
was-
like to think, right?
I wasn't, I really wasn't aware of that sort of thing in the search, but she had the temperament and the skills and the desire, and the Bloomberg administration is coming to a close, and the chemistry was right, as much as anything else.
She had the skills that matched
So,
what they
so
needed.
we don't, it's most important to have someone with the right temperament, skill, and professional attitude, and the right style in working with people in Cohasset. It's nice to have knowledge of Chapter 44 and all the regulations we have here, but they're all in books. You can read them. You have a town council, you have a town clerk, there are lots of people in this building who know that stuff. And once you've been through the bureaucratic cycle once, you pretty much know it. People of middle age generally don't develop new interpersonal skills. So that's a really, that's, you know, coming with that fully formed is really, is more important than knowing the obscure portions of some Massachusetts state law, because that's learnable.
So if I have your timeline right, we were right around mid-October with the possibility of a couple of weeks slippage, so say we're at November 1st. The board has looked at 3 or 4 candidates, interviewed them, and what typically happens at that point? They make a decision, but there's, could be somebody in a job or not, or...
Usually, when you come to the end, a board votes to offer Mr. X or Mrs. X the position of town manager contingent on the negotiation of an employment contract. So you made a decision, and then you see if you can work out the terms. And usually by that time, you know, there's enough chemistry going so that there's enough goodwill that people want to do that. We try not to put what the employment terms are in the profile. Because it just doesn't feel like the right place. And it's important in terms of attracting a good pool, that the town send a signal, that it will stretch itself a little bit for the right person. But we don't want to have language in the profile that says Cohasset will give the store away, language that would be read that way. And you're not gonna stretch yourself for somebody who's not the right person, but we cannot interview people who do not apply. So we have to be honest about this, but we have to send a signal that gets people who have real choices about where they apply into our net.
Which is why this profile is so important.
So that's kind of the storyline. Once a screening committee votes its slate to the board, it's pretty much the board's show. And we'll help the board on request design an interview process. But we're usually not present. It's usually carried out by the board, and boards usually like to do that stuff by themselves. And boards decide whether they want the candidates to be interviewed by a panel of townspeople as well as themselves. And, you know, people kind of custom tailor things at that stage. But the most important thing is you're dealing with really super professional candidates at that stage. No filler.
Please.
Forgive my ignorance
No,
about
no, no.
this. What is the expense to the town for your services?
The professional fee for our services of the kind that I described here is $14,000.
Okay.
And there are some reimbursable expenses that go on top of that. I mean, we pay for the advertising and send the bill to the town, and we pay for background checks that the town would typically do itself on employees, and we use a firm for that. And
Excuse
we,
me.
we submit that for reimbursement to the town.
So 14 plus costs.
So 14 plus costs.
Okay.
And our costs are, our costs are almost all things, costs that the town would bear if it was
No,
doing this
no,
itself.
I'm
Yeah.
just clarifying.
The-
That's
so-
understood.
Hmm.
That's,
I have a question, realizing that each situation is different, each town is different. In your experience, have you found that there's a composition of a selection committee that seems to work better than others?
The more knowledgeable the members in the aggregate are, or the more familiar they are with the workings of the town, both historically and how all the parts work together and how the money works, and you know, relatively close observers of town meeting and Board of Selectmen and previous managers, so they have kind of a feeling on the pulse of the town and some experience, but it's not a bad thing to have a few fresh faces. It tends to be helpful if one of the citizen members is, you know, an HR executive at some enterprise, because they're familiar with what it's like hiring executives, and they all say the same thing: oh, all top-level recruitments are hard. You know, and they've all
Right.
kind of struggled through this, and they kind of help the rest of the committee, and they help us. You know, the other thing is, you know, people who have experience in working in complex organizations. This isn't a big organization, but it's a complex organization. You deliver water, you take away sewer, you got a military force over here, you take care of the Atlantic Ocean over there. I mean, it's like a miniature holding company. You know, with all these divisions that do very different kinds of things. So it's complex. The other thing that's not talked about very much is that power in a New England town is very diffuse. It's the design. It's not an accident. It's designed that way, and that's and you need somebody who can manage and lead effectively in that kind of environment where you have some direct appointing power, you have some direct appointment, but a lot of your power comes from the power to persuade, and your historical knowledge and your personal credibility. It's not just positional power that you need in order to lead, and I think you know what I mean. It's important to have people on the committee who know that that's the texture of the town, and can discern whether a particular candidate can work in that environment. There's some subtleties here, which is why you can't quantify it, really.
We are very fortunate to have a great wealth of talent within our citizenry. And I know that we have people who have experience auditing municipalities or working on a state level with HR and things like that. So I think that we have a really great pool of people that we could pull from, who are not only familiar with Cohasset, but are also have that outside experience that you speak of that they can bring in.
Narrowing it down to a manageable number is probably the biggest challenge, right? Because there are so many people.
I mean, some of this is intuitive. You have to kind of figure it out. I mean, just by way of sharing an experience, one of the discussions in a number of towns is, should there be town employees or department heads on the committee? It's a question that comes up fairly often. And the answer to the question has as much to do with the customs and traditions of each town as it has to do with anything else. We have towns where the Board of Selectmen is very strongly in favor of having one or two department heads on a committee. And we have, you know, it's an absolute, it's the way we do business. We have other towns where the board is unified in, you know, no, this is a high-level political, small p, decision about the leadership of the community. There are other people that we can have do this. It's important to do it that way. So that's not right, wrong. We have one town, recently, where the selectmen said, well, yeah, it's not a bad idea to have 1 out of 7 be a department head. Tell the department heads to get together and pick one of their peers. Who's not to represent his or herself, but to represent the department head cadre.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, I'd never seen that before, but
Did it work?
that was, it worked. I mean, you know, the outcome of the process was fine, and the person was very professional, and he brought a perspective, but it was something I hadn't seen before, so, you kinda gotta, sometimes you gotta just feel your way through these things.
Getting way ahead of
Sure,
this,
go ahead.
But just came to mind, have you worked with screening committees that have included somebody from out of town? Like another town administrator or another town official?
No, we have not.
Okay.
Go ahead.
If we were to, as you say, pull the trigger, what is it that you would expect from us? What should we have prepared to begin the process for you?
Your appointment calendars,
Okay.
more than anything else, really.
Okay.
What I can do, if it's something you'd like, is in the next couple of days, I can send the board a formal scope of services, so you can see how that works, and see how this looks when it's laid out in writing, and we have a 2-page standard intergovernmental service agreement, and if it's the right thing, or you want, you can vote to go forward, and if you want to talk some more or modify it in some way, we can talk about that, but at least you have something written in front of you,
And,
if that's comfortable.
and that'll include the dollar amount?
Yeah, it'd be comprehensive.
Okay.
I think that would be most helpful.
Does the board have any other questions? I thought I'd open it up to anybody in the audience that, unless there's any more questions here, we can come back.
No, I'm listening, I haven't.
Okay. Any questions in the audience?
Sam Waitman, 255 Atlantic Avenue. You referred to your reference checks and background investigation. Is that something you perform, or does the screening committee perform that?
We call professional references ourselves. We commission a firm that works for us to perform criminal history, credit, and checks that verify educational credentials.
So you don't ask the screening committee or encourage the screening committee to do their own reference checking?
That is correct.
Do you object to the screening committee doing that?
We think, if the Board of Selectmen wants to put in the scope of the screening committee that they are responsible for comprehensive reference checking, we will include that in the contract. We will reduce the fee proportionately, and the totality of that responsibility will be on the screening committee.
Okay.
You can't hybridize this.
But,
I disagree, but.
well, if you did all this background check, that wouldn't eliminate, if it's down to a 3 or 4 candidates doing a visit to the town or something, would it?
No.
No. So in essence, we would be, if you did the whole thing, we would do something a little extra, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, you're visiting with your political peers
That's
in
true,
another
that's true.
jurisdiction.
And they don't give you
And
the.
asking
Yeah.
for, you're not calling ahead, you're kind of showing up,
Yeah,
drop from the sky one day,
yeah,
to get, so you can see if you can trust your bones
yeah.
as much as anything else.
Mhm.
But no prohibition on that.
What kind of background checks do you do?
Well, the background is criminal history, credit, and educational credentials. Those are formal.
Formal stuff,
References, we talk to people
references?
that the candidates have worked with before,
Mm-hmm,
and ask questions that are relevant to this, but we don't do that unless they're on the screening committee shortlist.
I see.
Because you don't really wanna burn someone's references if they're not a serious candidate.
So you have a more comprehensive one. If it's just the final ones, you really do that.
It's
The
all- it's-
very detailed one.
The way it typically works is the screening committee says, okay, there are 5 people we want to advance to the board, tentatively. Collins Center, would you please go and do the background checks and check the references and let us know how they come out and whether there's anything material we should know before we finalize these recommendations. And we do that, takes a couple of weeks. We report back to the screening committee, and if they're comfortable, then they vote the slate to go ahead to be advanced to the Board of Selectmen.
So you work very closely with the screening committee then?
Yes, during that
In
particular
that period.
period.
Okay.
No, I was gonna ask the question about who the references go to, because this was a problem previously. I think that there was a lot of information known at the screening level, the screening committee level, that necessarily didn't end up in the selectmen's purview. And there was a lot of information that wasn't necessarily shared with us, about some of the references that had been checked. So I guess the tricky part is, once it gets to the selectmen level, for candidates, assuming we were to get 3 or 5 candidates, if there were some material things that might have been shared with the screening committee, but yet for whatever reason they felt that they wanted to still put forward these candidates, how does the board find out about this stuff as a collective? Because we're meeting in public session all the time. You know what I mean? That makes sense?
Well, it's never been an issue that's come up with us, but I can understand, how it could.
Right.
The simplest thing for a board to do in a formal way in that situation is deputize 1 or 2 of the members to
Be on the screening
chat with
committee.
Mary and I, and the chair of the screening committee, kind of offline. We can do things that way.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be, we don't check backgrounds or references until we get a release from the candidate. And the release allows us to get the information. It
Correct.
doesn't really allow us to spread it around too much.
Sure.
So, but we can figure out how to address that if it's the right thing to do
Yeah.
at the time.
I also think, we have a responsibility to do what we talked about earlier, which is go to the communities and talk to people. Stay at the Red Roof Inn and whatever town and ask lots of questions.
Well, do you want candidates from the southeast or the southwest?
Why, is Red Roof Inn indigenous to a certain?
Agnes, do you have a question?
Agnes McCann, 104 Jones Street. I'd like to hear a little bit about how you determine, or in fact, who determines where you get your information for the profile.
We get it from the selectmen. and the department heads, and literature and reports that have been prepared by the town, public information.
Ted?
Just
Sure.
curious, two things. One, because you're affiliated with UMass, are you exempt from public procurement? And then I guess a follow-up, is the town also exempt if they could sole source contract to you?
The way it works is the procurement law that binds municipalities has a long list of things that are exempt from it. One of the exemptions is any transaction with the Commonwealth or its agencies. So it's the town that's exempt from the provisions of Chapter 30B in terms of contracting with us or any other Commonwealth agency.
And if they chose to hear from some other competitive organizations that may be private, would they have to go through a procurement process then? Like we had the town had an outside agent, an independent consultant that helped them on some prior searches, and they put out for bid that service. If they wanted to put out for bid that service, would they have to have a procurement process?
Generally, my understanding is yes.
Yes. I believe the answer is yeah.
I'm familiar with the Collins Center. I think they're absolutely terrific organization. Because you've had a lot of experience, this town has a litigation with a former employee who may, if he prevails, be able to come back to this position. I was curious if you had any experience with other towns, or that may have been the case.
No.
Any thoughts for the board on how to proceed, knowing that's a situation for them?
You know, my observation from, you know, not, and it's not based on any knowledge of the facts here, is that, usually employment claims are, in the end, satisfied with money.
I believe that if they prevail, they're entitled to have their job back, and that may not.
This is really a question for the town's lawyer,
Okay.
not.
But I guess maybe goes
It's not good to
Sure.
go into areas you don't know anything
Okay,
about.
that's fine. Let me ask you then about recruitment of capable candidates.
Mhm.
You know, having experience with a lot of candidates that apply for this job, would you
Mhm.
see that to be a deterrent for a candidate?
No. I don't think so, because whoever is selected is going to have an employment contract with the town, which is gonna pay and vacation and, you know, other kind of stuff. And, if this is a real contingency, as opposed to an ephemeral contingency, it can be addressed in an employment contract. You know, and, you know, that's stuff that happens 6 months from now. You can't put the world on hold.
Because it would be great to have good candidates. Is there-
You know, one of the questions that hasn't been asked, but is, gee, what if it's November 1st and we have a mediocre pool of candidates, Dick?
Right.
You know, despite best efforts, our recommendation, and we would work on this without any additional charge, is, you know, let's just take a time out here, see if we made any mistakes in the profile that accidentally chilled people in terms of application, and advertise again. Different people are in the market at different points in the calendar, and it's worth backing off. Once in 30 searches, we had to do that, and it was the right thing to do, and the search came out well. Sometimes timing's just bad, but that's no reason to go ahead. And town's been here for 300 years. A couple of months to get it right isn't gonna make any difference. It'll be inconvenient, but it really won't make any difference.
Thank you.
Thank you. Russ?
Russell Benetti, 20 Parker Ave. Kingston is going through a process now, and what they've been doing is having the finalists, they had a 2-week period where they met with all the different department heads throughout the town. You were saying having a committee that would have a couple department heads. Do you think it's advantageous for all of the department heads to interview this person as well?
Well, bear in mind that in Kingston, almost none of the department heads report to the town administrator or are appointed by him or her. Most department heads in Kingston are appointed by a variety of independently elected boards and commissions. And those commissions see themselves as independent, and the line of authority, for a lot of folks is to, a conservation commission or board of health or whatever. So it's a very different bureaucratic setup than here. Although it is, and this is really a judgment for the Board of Selectmen, it is not a bad idea when you get to the final interviews, three or four people, to not simply have the board interview people for 75 minutes, but have them meet both people within the town hall apparatus and outside while they're here visiting the town and going for final interviews. And I assure you, citizens who meet candidates and department heads who meet candidates typically let their favorite selectman know their views. That's fairly typical, and it's not unhelpful information. And if you sit on a board, you can't, one of the things you listen for is, on candidate A, are people kind of saying the same thing, or is everybody saying something different, And it can be very helpful.
Were you involved in the process with Kingston?
No. We do a lot of charter reform work. So we know what the administrative setup is in most of the larger towns. So that's why we're familiar with Kingston. We've never worked in Kingston, but we know that, it's actually not that untypical a setup.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
No?
No?
Thank you very much.
Thank
you,
you
Dick.
very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Appreciate
Thank
your
you very
time.
much. Thank you.
Tune into the Bruins game on your way home.
Yeah, thank you very much. Why don't you give one to the secretary,
Yes,
so she can
yesterday,
get,
right?
yes to be.
Yesterday, I lost the GJ, I don't see too often on these spots.
It's
Thank you.
Norwegian.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard, thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Oh,
Thanks.
you're Asian, I didn't realize that. Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very, very interesting. Well,
Any comments? I think we're,
Mr.
Hey,
Kobayashi,
do
did
you
you
wanna
need
send
these
these
back?
back?
No, I do not.
Thank you.
oh, okay.
so we
Anybody
can-
like an extra copy, or you wanna divide them up?
I'd like the
Yeah.
Sherburne one if I could.
Yeah.
I have the other one.
Either
Yeah.
Sherburne or the CFO.
Yeah,
Either
well,
one.
I was
What do you
thinking
want?
Sherburne.
All right, so we'll give you the CFO.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
believe these are all on their website too.
And I have the Dracut one already, so.
We
I'll
have the
do-
Dracut already. I thought.
No,
I'd
I'm all
like
set,
to
Jenny,
see-
thank you.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm just curious to know on that. Well, are
Well,
we,
it sounds like we'll have a proposal within a
Next-
week, I would think.
yeah,
And we can take it up at that time,
all right,
At the next meeting, yeah.
review it, and
okay.
put it up for discussion.
The one thing I'd like to propose to the board is that we don't review this in a vacuum. I thought that Mr. Kobayashi's presentation was thorough, the
Mhm,
evidence of
yeah.
the search.
No,
If, you use this as evidence, as a search
Mm.
process, was well thought out, complete. He had
Mhm.
answers for many questions, and then questions for those that we hadn't yet asked. it's worthwhile to at least be comparative. If there are others that produce, or attempt to produce a similar result using their own process, I think it's worth it simply to
Right.
evaluate it. Having said that, it was very informative, and I think adds a level of expertise that none of us individually have, and could certainly use, so.
Very, very good. He gave a broad-based point of view.
What do you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to do some kind of comparison. I think to the point that Ted was making earlier, you know, once we get out of a service that's offered, an intergovernment relationship, we are gonna have to deal with procurement issues, and then at that point, we probably would wanna compare to, say, private consulting firms if we were to do that. You know, I don't know too many. I'm willing to do a little research, and hopefully we'll have this proposal next week to discuss either next week or the week after.
And I think he thought it was about a week off, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so it seems to me that the last time we went through this, that we did put an RFP out, and I think Collins also applied to
Yes, they
that,
did.
although they, you know, because that was the process that we went through. So, I think that's something for the board to contemplate between now and our next meeting for discussion, if that's the
Okay.
route we
Okay.
wanna go.
Okay.
Okay?
Good.
Okay. All right.
There's no further discussion tonight, I think.
Okay.
Mike, did you have a question?
Want a motion?
Okay. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.